Live from London, this is BBC News. Boeing's Starliner capsule is due to land back on Earth imminently, but the astronauts it was supposed to be carrying are staying behind on the International Space Station. The Israeli military says it's investigating an incident in which an American-Turkish dual citizen was shot dead in the occupied West Bank. Sentencing in Donald Trump's hush money trial has been postponed until after the US presidential election. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Rajini Vaidyanathan. Breaking news, Boeing's Starliner spacecraft is landing back on Earth without its crew after undocking from the International Space Station. It's about to land back on Earth. You can see the images there. It's using parachutes to slow its descent to land at the White Sands Space Harbour in New Mexico in the US. Well, the Starliner capsule developed technical problems shortly after its launch, and NASA opted to leave the two astronauts on board on the ISS until February. Now, it's taken about 6 hours to get back from space. Earlier, NASA said that Butch and Suni, the pair who are stranded, were in good spirits and in regular contact with their families. Now, we do have some commentary on that feed from NASA, so when we do get that, we will listen into it. But as you can see there, remarkable images there, Boeing Starliner spacecraft beginning its journey now back to Earth. But as we were saying there, the astronauts it was supposed to be carrying will be staying behind on the International Space Station. Now, NASA says it is now back on Earth, and the empty craft, which had been switched to autonomous mode, has undocked from the orbiting hub. Let's have a listen in.
Starliner is back on Earth. That landing coming at 11:01 and 35 seconds Central Time, 10:01 and 31 seconds Mountain Time at White Sands Space Harbor at the U.S. Army's Missile Range in New Mexico. Our landing and recovery teams will now wait for clearance before making their way to the spacecraft.
One of the changes required with no crew on board is that the team here in the flight control room will be the ones to command the parachute to be cut away so that the wind doesn't pull the capsule along, but that's no problem for them. So now with Starliner down, they can begin working on some of the post-landing to-do items.
So there you have
it.
Again,
we saw Starliner touchdown at 11:01 p.m. Central Time. That's 1 minute after midnight Eastern Time.
The Boeing Starliner spacecraft now back in the New Mexico desert. NASA there with its commentary, you can see those images, quite incredible to see it being parachuted back to Earth. And we're staying on the live stream from NASA now. As I was saying just then, the astronauts who were supposed to be travelling on that spacecraft are staying behind on the International Space Station. It was in some ways a troubled 3-month test mission. The capsule suffered technical problems after it launched, and NASA's Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, who were on board, are remaining in the International Space Station because it was deemed too risky for them to return home. Well, let's speak now to former NASA astronaut Dottie Metcalf-Lindenberger. Dottie, welcome to BBC News. It's been quite a moment for this mission, hasn't it, Dottie?
Yes, I've been listening and following along since about an hour plus ago, and it's good to see it touch down.
And how do you feel about the plight of your colleagues, Butch and Suni, who aren't travelling back with it?
Well, I don't think it's a plight. I think that they're actually in a really good place. And this was a great decision to be made because we now have redundancy of vehicles. And so we can keep them on orbit. and verify that the vehicle is safe. And so there will still be many tests done after this. But both Butch and Sunny are very experienced astronauts. Both of them have commanded the International Space Station. And I bet you they are having a really good time in space. They're accomplished spacewalkers. They've done so much science and experiments. I bet that they're just an added addition to this great crew already. So I'm sure they're having a good time in space too. But this was just a really well thought out plan. And we did hear words earlier from them today about their progress through the training on this vehicle. And I think this just speaks so well to how engineering and NASA work.
Dottie, you talk about them having a good time while they're up there. You've been up there too, haven't you? Just tell our viewers what it's like.
Well, the International Space Station is an international accomplishment. And that means, of course, that always there are people from around the world working up there. So right now they're working with international colleagues. Some of them are actually classmates of theirs. So that's always fun. I got to fly with two of my classmates on a space shuttle to the space station. You get to look down at Earth, and you also get to look out into the depth of space. And it can be a very humbling experience when you look out into that depth, into the beauty of the stars, the Milky Way, but also when you look back at Earth and think about what we are trying to accomplish in having this orbital laboratory and also preparing to go back to the moon. So it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's international, and I just bet that they are soaking all of that up.
Dottie, it's so amazing to hear you talk about something that so many of us can only imagine. Do stay with us. I'm just going to bring our science editor into the conversation, Rebecca Morell, who joins me in the studio. Good to talk to you, Rebecca. This was supposed to be an 8-day mission, ended up being 8 months. What's your assessment of it?
Well, I mean, the landing looked pretty good from where I'm sitting. There's going to be a NASA press briefing happening within the next hour and a half, so we'll hear a bit more about it then. But the spacecraft seemed to perform very well. Everything looked okay. The teams will be sort of rushing over to check it out now. I mean, when I say it went to plan, the bit that didn't go to plan was the fact that it didn't have the astronauts inside of the capsule. It was coming back empty, just with their space suits in there, in fact. And they've stayed behind on the International Space Station for, as you said, what was initially supposed to be 8 days, but that's now going to last for 8 months. They're not coming back until February next year. And that's because of the sort of complex scheduling of kind of toing and froing from the space station. So they have to wait for a SpaceX rockets and spacecraft to head up to the space station. That's going to be bringing 2 astronauts instead of the planned 4 astronauts. And that means they'll be able to come back on that spacecraft when it leaves in February next year, making up a team of 4 coming back down to Earth.
But as Dottie was saying, they'll be fine up there, so there's no concerns on that point. Before I bring Dottie back in, I wanted to ask you, as science editor, what the value of this particular mission was. What was the goal of it?
Well, it's a really important mission for NASA, and it kind of hasn't gone as they hoped, or as Boeing hoped, in fact. But this was all part of NASA's plan to have 2 commercial crew carriers who could take their astronauts to and from space, and cargo as well. Because there were several years when America didn't have its own method of getting to space when it retired the space shuttle program. So they were relying on Russia's Soyuz spacecraft to take their astronauts up to space for quite a long time. So the idea of NASA having commercial carriers who they sort of pay for seats, for taxi rides in their spacecraft. So SpaceX has been doing this for some time. Boeing also had a contract with NASA, but theirs hasn't gone as well to plan, I guess. You know, it's quite delayed by several years. And of course, this test mission with a crew on board hasn't gone to plan. So quite what happens next for Boeing will be interesting. I mean, NASA has emphasised its commitment to working with Boeing. So I do think we'll see the spacecraft fly again, but how long before another pair of astronauts get inside it? You know, that's all to be decided. They have to fix the technical problems.
OK, do stay with us, Rebecca and Dottie. We're just going to listen in to the commentary, which continues on that NASA feed.
Working ground teams, both NASA and Boeing, out here at White Sands in New Mexico. So with that, sending it back over to Mission Control, Houston.
Thanks so much, Josh and Leah. It's great to see Starliner home, and I envy you the up-close view, but we appreciate your updates.
I do too. Starliner has returned safely. Well done to the entire team for completing the mission with a successful undocking, deorbit, and landing. Starliner has once again proven herself a safe ride to and from space. On behalf of the entire Boeing team, welcome home, Calypso.
There you have it. Welcome home, the commentary says. Dottie, I'm going to bring you back in. Why weren't the two astronauts able to return back?
Well, there's a whole process at NASA before they make a decision to return the vehicle with the crew, and they went through all the data and they went through the engineering that was understood at the time, and the decision was to keep the crew on orbit. And that is exactly why we want this redundancy of vehicles, because they can have those Sunny and Butch stay on orbit and it's just fine. And that luxury hasn't always existed, as you heard. And so that's why they didn't come back. And that's okay. I think that's the wise decision. And then we'll learn from the data back from Starliner, and there will be much to come in the future. And that's the part of spaceflight. And we know it's risky, but there was no need to take human life risk this time. And so that's why the decision was made to keep those astronauts on orbit. That's really wise.
Okay, do stay with us, Dottie. We're going to just show you some pictures there. Oh, we've got some music on it too, from the International Space Station. I've still got Rebecca Morell, our science editor, with me in the studio as well. Rebecca, I'm reading an article that you've written on the BBC website. And one of the things you talk about when we talk about some of the challenges and problems is the capsule experiencing leaks of helium, which you said pushed fuel into the propulsion system. So what were some of the technical problems that meant that now you have those two astronauts who seem to be, completely fine, but still up in space?
Yeah, I mean, the problems started really quite soon after launch. There were these leaks of helium, so this is a gas that helps to sort of push fuel around the propulsion system. And there were issues with some of the thrusters on the spacecraft too. So that's initially why the mission got extended, because while Starliner was actually docked to the International Space Station, Boeing engineers and also NASA too were sort of looking at these problems and working out exactly what was causing them and whether there was a way to actually resolve them in a manner to kind of get the astronauts safely back down. I mean, it took them a long time. They spent months trying to work this out, testing in space, but also testing on Earth as well to look at kind of why these problems were happening. And I think in the end, as Dottie said, for NASA, they've got to weigh up the risks of this. You've got the option of returning Butch and Sunny in a capsule where there are these problems, so there is a risk attached to that, or you can return the capsule back empty and they can come back later with a much less risk to them doing so, and that's why NASA went down that line.
We're just showing the pictures now again of the undocking, which was many months ago. You talk about in your article, Rebecca, as well, that was 6 hours ago. Pardon me, I'm getting my timelines very wrong. Yeah, that was the undocking 6 hours ago as it returned back to Earth. But in the article that you've written, talk about there being tension in the room between Boeing and NASA when it was making that decision about whether to have the astronauts back on board in the time frame that had been planned, or whether to postpone things, as has now been the case. Rebecca, just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this was from a press briefing this week. It was kind of an interesting insight into what went wrong, and the NASA spokesman basically said Boeing did want their spacecraft to carry the astronauts back. They thought it would perform well. They'd run different models. They thought that the safety issues weren't enough to make it a risk to Butch and Sunny coming home. NASA disagreed with that ultimately, and ultimately the decision does come down to NASA because they're NASA astronauts. It's a Starliner, a Boeing Starliner spacecraft, but they're NASA astronauts on board. And I think, what's been quite interesting throughout this is running through a lot of these decisions. NASA has been looking back to its space shuttle program and, of course, the 2 disasters with that which killed astronauts on board. So they take these things really, really seriously. And I think particularly over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of openness from NASA about the decision process and what they've been finding out about the technical problems with the Boeing Starliner. So it's been interesting to see this process play out.
OK, Rebecca, let's bring Dottie back in. Dottie, would Butch and Sunny have everything that they need to last the next 8 months? Or not the next 8 months, but to last until, next February when they will be coming back. I mean, would they have packed enough?
Yes. I mean, obviously, they personally do not take all their gear up. A lot of gear is pre-positioned or will come up throughout a flight, and there will be adjustments made as the next SpaceX vehicle will only have 2 crew members. So you could potentially also add additional things there that they may need. But there's always enough in space for astronauts. We actually don't need as much as we think we do on Earth. Because you don't really get dirty. I mean, you do sweat. There's other things like that, of course, but there's always food available. They had already planned for the team that would be coming up on the SpaceX crew to have 4, so there'll be plenty of food to go around. And the clothing part isn't as big of an issue. A lot of us wear general sizes, and you can make things stretch quite far in space. And that's part of this great part, too, of the 2 crew members up there, both Sunny and Butch. Like I said, they've both been commanders. They've done many things here on Earth where you don't need a lot of stuff. And I just know that they'll be adding and contributing greatly to the science and experiments while being up there. So
Dottie,
I'm sure that the last thing they're worried about is clothes.
It's really interesting though, isn't it? Because it's an insight that a lot of us just can't understand or relate to. But what's the longest time that you were at the International Space Station for?
Yeah, so I was a shuttle astronaut, so I was on board for 11 days. Our mission did extend just slightly because of some problems our vehicle had had. And again, our ground team worked, solved those problems, and then we undocked. So all total, I've been in space for only 15 days, so not nearly as long as Butch and Sunny. But again, what I had there, I felt overly supplied on my flight, especially with clothing. You just really don't need as much as we sometimes send.
That's a message in life, I think, isn't it? Dottie Metcalf-Lindenberger, former NASA astronaut, thank you very much for your very unique insight into this developing story. Before we move away from that story, I'm just going to ask Rebecca Morell, our science editor, one more quick question. Rebecca, what comes next then?
What comes next? Well, they'll be testing the spacecraft, they'll be gathering data from it, they'll be looking to see if they can overcome these technical problems. Meanwhile, SpaceX, the rocket will launch at the end of September. That's going to sort of be the spacecraft that eventually takes Butch and Sunny, the astronauts, back down in February next year. But they're going to be there for a while. I mean, they're settling in. I'm very pleased you asked about the clothing, because that is the question everyone's been asking. Kind of how many pairs of pants do you take up to the International Space Station when you're supposed to go for 8 days and then suddenly it's 8 months? But yeah, no, it was good to get Dottie's insight on that.
And yours, of course, Rebecca Morell, our science editor. I mentioned Rebecca's article on the International Space Station and the Starliner. That's on the BBC News website. It has plenty of insight. We've just got it on the screen there. That was co-authored by Rebecca and also Alison Francis and Michael Shields McNamee. Yeah, you can see that on the BBC News website. Well, before we go, let's recap on that developing story that happened just in the last half an hour or so. Let's show you the pictures again of Boeing Starliner spacecraft as it successfully landed in the New Mexico desert just about 25 minutes ago or so. Now, it had travelled back to Earth from the International Space Station without the 2 crew members who were due to travel back with it. They were astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams, who are now remaining for the moment at the International Space Station. Now, that is because the spacecraft developed technical problems, including leaks of helium shortly after its original launch, and it was decided by NASA that it would be much safer for the 2 astronauts to remain on board the ISS. And we can bring you a live shot there from the International Space Station there. Isn't technology amazing when you can see all these kinds of pictures? And we spoke to a former NASA astronaut who reassured us that Butch and Sonny would have everything that they need on that spacecraft to stay safe and well-fed until they return back to Earth in February. They'll return in a SpaceX capsule after they'll have spent 8 months in orbit. And NASA says both astronauts are in good spirits. We will be hearing from NASA in the next hour or so, giving us an update on that. But for the moment, we'll leave you with those pictures. I'm Rajini Vaidyanathan. Do stay with us here on BBC News.